one of the biggest mistakes that everybody makes when they're trying to understand Catholicism and pro-life issues, even on the Catholic side, is about this phrase, open to life. We say that the conjugal act must always be open to life. And so many people hear that as just, well, I'm just never allowed to use birth control. And they just sort of take that as a rule. It's usually a deontological sort of like, I just have to do this and hope that the church is right and not wrong about morality. But we know that that's not the way that morality is. We know that it's the truth about the good of the human person. We know that it's the truth about the good of the human person. And so it's not just a random rule. It's also important that we actually understand the rule itself and the concept itself. What does it mean for the conjugal act to be open to life? Well, that means that every act must be directed or oriented towards life, not the creation of life every single time, not perfectly aimed such that the woman gets pregnant every moment, not at all, but that the act itself is oriented towards, is aimed towards life and the conception of new life. So the thing is that we kind of live in an era where the mythos is that basically everything we do is kind of meaningless. That's the secular mythos anyway, that the things that we try to do that are moral are basically moral preferences. So that when we say don't be racist, what we mean is like, I don't like it when you're racist or something like that. People don't really think too much about it. It's like, well, you might be into music, you might be into sports, you might be a thinker, a philosopher, or whatever floats your boat. Just do your own thing. It ends up with most of our actions coming across as meaningless. But that is not the Catholic worldview. The Catholic worldview is teleological, which means that everything that you do has meaning. Every action that you take is a meaningful one. If it is intentional and it's done on purpose, then it's a true human act. Well, we say that stuff a lot, and I think maybe it just kind of washes over us. It's sort of like the whole God is love, or like love your neighbor. We have these certain phrases that just kind of like wash over people in Catholic morality, and people are, especially students, are just sort of like, yeah, okay, everything I do is meaningful, whatever. No, that's an incredibly weighty statement. It's good news and bad news. The good news is everything that you do is deeply meaningful. The bad news is, or at least the intimidating news is, everything you do is deeply meaningful. That means that every choice that you make helps to shape not only who you are, but the very fabric of reality, the world itself as it exists. And so that leaves us back to our question of rules and this commandment about sexuality, that every sex act should be open to life. What on earth does that mean? Well, it has absolutely nothing to do, first of all, with percent chance. That is the percent chance that the woman will become pregnant. Absolutely nothing to do with that. I say that to my students every single year, and inevitably a couple of them still get tricked on both the test over bioethics and then the final exam for the course. I'll always ask them a question that's something like, well, being open to life means there's at least like a 1% chance that a baby will be conceived. In every single form of contraception, there is at least a small percent chance that the contraceptive will fail and that a baby will be conceived anyway. That goes for the progesterone, the hormone pills. That goes for the barrier method. Whatever it is, it has a small percent chance to fail. But you can't be using condoms and saying, well, I'm open to life. That doesn't how it works, because there's a small percent chance that the thing fails and the baby is conceived. That's not what it means to be open to life, that there's some percent chance. In fact, there may be 0% chance for the sex act to conceive a child, and yet it may still be open to life. On the other side of the spectrum, it is also not referencing your intention, your mental thoughts, your idea when you go to perform the conjugal act in the marriage. It's not like saying, well, you must at least have an open mind to having children. So it has nothing to do with like your personal intent or the state of your mind or the meaning that you want to give to the act. The act itself has meaning. We're not shaking hands. We're not going to the bathroom. We're engaging in the most sacred and the most intimate act that a human being can engage in. And so you better believe that if everything we do has meaning, then especially this has meaning. And that meaning is not just what you happen to put into it yourself. So as I jokingly sort of sometimes tell my students, like, if you're engaging in the conjugal act and you're thinking in the back of your mind, oh, come on, no children. Yeah, is that a problem? Yeah, that's a problem. That doesn't represent the truth about the good for the human person. You're intentionally, at least, holding something back from your spouse, and you're intentionally robbing the act of something. But objectively speaking, in terms of the object, the act is still happening. So are you kind of weird? Is there a fault there? Is there a defect there? I hope that you don't need me to go get my big catechism and go, well, if you look in paragraph 2 here, I hope you don't need me to tell you that that is not the case, that's not correct. If you're sitting there thinking, well, gee, I really hope I don't have a baby this time. You really shouldn't think that way. By the way, if you did think that way and you did conceive a child, it sure would be awkward interacting with that child later. You've always got in the back of your mind like, man, this is the one I didn't want to have. I don't think you really want that. So then, okay, I've given you the two poles of what openness to life definitely is not. Let's talk about what it is then. If it has nothing to do with the percent chance, and if it has nothing to do with the mental intention that you have while you're performing the act, then what exactly is it? It means that the act itself is directed, is aimed towards life. Let me give you an analogy to help you understand exactly what that means. So let's take another act, eating. What is eating aimed towards? Unfortunately, if you're American, you probably are going to say pleasure. But no, eating is aimed towards something else. Eating is aimed towards nutrition. Pleasure is supposed to be joy, the good, the rejoicing that comes from when you attain the objective good of nutrition. We've done a pretty good job of trying to separate the two, what with certain fast food chains and certain little sweets that we can buy in the store and everything like that. But the goal of eating is nutrition. Now, pay very close attention to the way that I phrase that. The goal of eating is nutrition. The act itself already has the teleology built in, the telos, the end, the reason. It's aimed like an arrow towards nutrition. Now, can it be perverted? Can you eat for other reasons? Absolutely. You could eat for purely pleasurable experiences. You know, the stork wants not a bigger mouth, but a longer neck, the medievals used to say, meaning like, I wish I could just savor this food as it goes down just a little more, right? You could make eating all about pleasure, which ironically leads to some defect of nutrition, right? It can lead to an imbalance, and then you're unhealthy, you're obese, you get sick, whatever. Okay, let's imagine that I have someone who really likes to eat, but who doesn't want this to happen, who doesn't want nutrition to come about as the effect of their eating. And so they come up with some really clever methods to stop the eating from getting to its end, to nutrition. Perhaps they come up with a method wherein they put, maybe a special type of barrier, a special type of film over the mouth while they, shoving the hamburger in there. They've got this special piece of plastic, so that they can taste it, but they don't have to actually ingest the nutrients from it. Or perhaps they just bite it and then they spit it out. Pretty disgusting, but perhaps they just chew on it for a while, and then it's like wine tasting. You just grab a burger and grab a candy bar and you chew it for a long time and then you spit it out. Disgusting, right? Maybe you even get really creative and you come up with some kind of a shunt, some kind of a pipe or something that you could insert into your throat, so that when the food, you get to eat it, you get to chew it, you get to have the pleasure of swallowing it, but so that when the food comes down, it actually just drips out of that little tube that you've inserted into your throat. Now, this seems ridiculous, but I hope you can understand where the analogy is going already. Eating has a natural goal. It has a natural telos. You could come up with all sorts of interesting technology to try and stop eating from accomplishing that goal, nutrition. But when you do that, that's contrary to the truth about the good of the human person. I could tell you, of course, that it breaks a commandment. I could say, well, that's gluttony. As a matter of fact, it's subspecies A. I could tell you the pages of the Summa where that is. We could reference the Catechism, but you could also just reason your way there. You could also just say, one piece of chocolate cake may have a little bit of nutrition in it and may be pleasurable. 7 pieces of chocolate cake instead of dinner. I wonder what the outcome of that is. I mean, you get to suffer the outcome in your body, right? Well, you get to suffer the outcome of sexual deviance too. It's just not always as immediately obvious. And it seems like people are, especially in the United States, in modernity, are a lot more inclined to deny that there are any negative outcomes. We call things natural, but they call the least natural things natural. Okay, so imagine then what open to life might mean. What is the end of sexuality? What is the purpose of sex? Well, the Catholic Church teaches that sex has a twofold meaning. The two are intertwined inseparably in with one another, although they remain conceptually distinguishable. So you have the unitive effect. You may have heard this before if you've taken a basic pro-life course or anything like that. It has a unitive effect, which means that the effect of sexuality is to bring together the spouses, or really just the partners, the people who are engaging in it, which is why C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters says something like, well, wherever two humans lie together, there a relationship is formed, which must be either eternally enjoyed or eternally endured. And so whenever that happens, the unitive effect within the bounds of marriage, within reason, within the plan of God, becomes a blessing, unifies the spouses, and it brings them closer to each other. Not only, I wouldn't divide the mental and the physical too sharply. We are both mental and physical creatures, but not only in the mind, but also biologically. And we're uncovering all of these pheromonal research discoveries about how exactly the biology works when two people have sex. So there's the unitive function. I'm sure I didn't say that right. And there's some kind of biologist out there, by the way, who's like, what an idiot. Yeah, I know. I'm moving quickly here. I'm trying to get this out. The unitive function is really not what we're talking about here. We're talking about openness to life. And so we're really trying to get at the procreative function of sex, the procreative meaning of sex. Of course, procreative means creative of life, towards creation. And so the actual act itself, both metaphysically and also biologically, spiritually, if I have to draw you a picture of that, my YouTube would probably become demonetized, but it is literally and metaphorically aimed at something, right? Sexuality is oriented towards something. And the only way that it becomes disoriented is if we put in some of these mechanisms, and of course I can't draw them about sexuality, that's what the analogy is for. We come with all these methods to detach sexuality from its procreative function. And openness to life means not that I'm thinking, oh, gee, I sure hope I have a child, or like, well, if I had a child, it would be okay. That actually should just be the default. That has to do with your mental intention. It's not core to the act itself. We're talking about the act itself being open to life. And of course, has nothing to do with the percentage of chance. The people that get this wrong, even in Catholic circles, often fall prey to common objections about openness to life. The most common one, in fact, the comment that got me off of social media initially after I started a conversation with a person was this: well, what about infertile couples? Does that mean that they can't have sex? So you get married and something happens, I don't know, you step on a landmine and all of a sudden you're infertile and now you can't sleep with your wife? What? That seems utterly morally ridiculous. It seems cruel. Well, first of all, it's not the case. But second of all, if the act itself is still aimed at life, is still both literally and metaphorically oriented towards the creation of new life, it doesn't have to guarantee that procreation is going to happen every single time. As a matter of fact, we could be pretty sure that it won't happen at a specific time. But the act itself is still meaningful, is still true, is still representative of the good. Now, again, we can pound on the commandments as long as you want about this. We can look at the catechism and we can teach our children. I mean, Catholics already have a pretty bad reputation for being all about sexuality. I don't think it's earned, by the way. I haven't heard a bunch of Catholics talk about sexuality except to affirm the value of life. But this is part of that. This is part of that. What we really need to do is reason together about what sexuality is. We can start then in what St. Thomas Aquinas calls the natural law. Well, what is the purpose of sexuality? If our acts indeed do have a purpose, and simply experiencing a life allows you to see that, right? If our actions do indeed have a purpose, a telos behind them, then sexuality will not survive being reduced to the level of some kind of like basically meaningless daily act, right? Which is what we have tried, which at least the media and those who peddle pornography have tried to do to sexuality. Like, I mean, need I name the apps where you swipe and, you pick a person based on their body? And need I point out the irony that those who consume pornography quickly become bored by the most beautiful bodies on the planet? Need I reference the extremity to which pornographic users can go? No, I don't. I mean, those are all part of the vice of lust, which leads one downward and downward and downward. Okay, so that means that I can't just have any old sort of like I can't do X, Y, or Z with my wife if it's not open to life. Well, that's basically right. And if the whole reason that you can't take the church's teaching seriously is because you can't do a certain sex act, which would not, in fact, be definitionally sex at all. It's not open to life. It's just what you're doing is something, well, that would be correctly in Greek called pornia, which means perversion. You might want to ask yourself what your priorities are. If that's the only thing keeping you out of the Catholic Church, if that's the only thing that makes you question your faith, is that you can't do a certain sex act or sex-ish act with your spouse. Because what you're doing is you're trying to redefine what sex actually is by saying, well, I think I want to make these two things basically meaningless, and I want to make it about pleasure. And as cheesy as it sounds, every pro-life video, every, basically theology of the body video is sort of like sex is about giving to the other person, not taking, and you can't objectify the other. As sort of like corny as that language sometimes sounds to some of my students, and it's obvious, by the way, I'm not making it up. As corny as that sometimes sounds, it is absolutely and totally true, right? You are either a taker or you are a giver. And in sexuality, we give our entire self to the other person. If we come up with any device or any technique or any method to keep part of ourselves back, to keep my capacity to be a father back, or to keep your capacity to be a mother back, if we do that, then we pervert what the act actually is. And no amount of mental intent or no amount of happenstance is going to cause that perversion to suddenly become true, to suddenly become good. So, openness to life, the act itself, not what's in your mind, not what may happen.